Atlanta season 3 so far, really giving it to us on the episodes that don't feature the main 4 members of the cast. This most recent episode about the little boy that had the Trinidadian Islander nanny that passed, amazing. Fendi, like the bag. This is the I Refuse podcast. So, typically, the season 3 so far, I'm usually good figuring out what's going on. But I'm finding out like the last 2 or 3, save for the big payback, I'm like, what the fuck are they telling? Am I missing something? It took me a while. I think it started with the old man and the tree. That took me a couple of days. And it was like after I recorded and uploaded the review of that episode, and I believe the big payback, I was like, oh shit. Like this, a lot of this stuff is based off of not only real life, but real life experiences I've experienced. So this most recent episode about the boy and the nanny, the boy of the affluent, well-to-do, married white couple. At first I was like, what's so special about this? But as the microaggressions started to show up by way more so of the mom, who was just not only out of pocket, but embody many attitudes I've witnessed from suburban white moms and suburban or even affluent white moms, as far as their attitudes towards the more marginalized, less less appealing in regards to social class, social value, and just overall respect. When they went from, the boy, their son, being on the couch and asking for a specific type of dressing or sauce to go with his lunch, I was like, that's interesting. What does he know about that? But it was little moments like that where it was like, okay, this kid is taking to not only the nanny as a person, but the culture and the food that she possibly exposed him to. I was like, I've never heard of this spicy curry stuff. And, when it comes to you've seen or have had experiences growing up where you're a native of America and your nanny or your caretaker or your babysitter is of a different culture. For me, I didn't have that. My babysitter was my older sister growing up in the same household. But I knew that, growing up, she babysat some of the white kids 2 or 3 apartment buildings down. And I think, in turn, later on, the oldest boy of the 3 kids ended up not only going to a high school that was predominantly black, but also ended up dating, marrying, and having kids with a black woman. Not sure if that's related, but I like to think there's some parallels between that and what this episode showed us, as far as, the son wanting the curry, the son knowing some of the chants at the funeral, the son not only taking to the culture, but actually having the feel and the spirit. when they were at the funeral, when he was more conscious of the fact that the nanny was more attentive to him than his own parents, which that's not uncommon if you actually think about it. You know, parents, when they hire a nanny or a baby, well, a nanny would be a more full term variation of babysitter. You know, babysitter, a couple hours here and there while the parents call it the date night. A nanny is more 5 or 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, doing the meals, doing the housekeeping, the homework help, taking the kids to school, being there to pick them up, like essentially a third parent. And with that, they, especially like natives of other cultures who are, I believe, more family oriented and more hands on, the exchange is that the kids have a more involved or well rounded experience. And it's little nuances in the episode that are obvious to me because I've seen it in other environments. That, you know, the boy would kind of point out, the son would point out, you know, when his mom was dropping him off and was starting to walk away, he was like, you know, well, the nanny would actually walk me to class. And, you know, it's one of those things in the reaction from the mother that struck a chord with me where it was just like, you know, I don't think it's clear, although I don't think it's clear in the episode whether or not the mom was like a stay-at-home or she had her own career. From what I understand, the father had a career. I mean, that's a social standard that the man works. It's not all too clear about what professionally the mother, what her role is professionally. But I've noticed in my own experience, just from observation, that like whether or not the mother is a stay-at-home mother, they would hire a nanny. And I personally, and this could be because of my upbringing, didn't see why a stay-at-home mom would hire a nanny when they have like only like 1 or 2 kids. And I was just like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? If it's 2 babies, sure, but like if one's like grade school age and the other's a baby, like what are you doing? Like I understand that my experiences influence the way I'm wired and the way I think and feel. I myself, everybody in the house worked. You know, if your mom or her living boyfriend are both working, we work around the house. And that's the routine, that's discipline. So when I started seeing in the mom little emotional nuances, and at some point some of her microaggressions as to, you know, the nanny's culture, the nanny's attentiveness, how her influence is much greater than the influence of the mom. And I thought, I believe microaggressions are steeped in resentment and jealousy. You know, I believe that, you know, us Black and brown folks have this power and this resonance and this influence naturally with people that, you know, the fluorescents and the sprites can't identify with. And it's not all of them. You know, there are certain ones, and I think that resentment and jealousy comes out of microaggressions. You know, the fear and the insecurity. You know, she felt a little inconvenience when the son made mention of the nanny uh, actually walking him to his class instead of just dropping him off at the door or the entryway of the school. She felt some kind of way as she started picking up on certain characteristic differences in her son that were a direct influence of the nanny that had disappeared. Or, well, at this point, the parents knew that she had passed, but they were not able to work their way around to telling him yet until the father blurted it out that she had passed. And they got wind of her funeral. So, outside of them being with their son and it's just the two of them, she in turn is starting to question, the mother is starting to question if A, they're doing things right, and B, as to what magnitude is the influence that's from the maid or the nanny manifesting in the son is going to do for him in the long run. On their way to the funeral, again, another microaggression is coming out of the mother and some out of the dad. Like, the strict difference between the mom and the dad at this point is that the dad is more open and less resentful, and more open world about it. Whereas the mom is more it's just more narrow-minded and, dare I say, prejudice. And some of her attitudes are reflected in stereotypes. They had a discussion, I believe, on the way to the funeral about, the what if, or should our nanny have been Chinese or of Orient descent, that would be more beneficial to their son and in turn beneficial to him in his adult life, because apparently, and this is not news, this is something I was aware of, there's been a long-standing stereotype that connects Oriental people, Asian people with math and finance. And not only that, the language, knowing the language is more advantageous in most business industries that are international. So with that, I think they were more so interested in using, had they had an Asian or Oriental nanny, using her her cultural know-how, her language, instilling that in their son, and then, at the most, just using them as a nanny or a caretaker for their son. Nothing, that doesn't at all sound like inequality, and it doesn't at all doesn't hinge on racism, and that at all doesn't sound like that's problematic in any way. But this is what's going on, because I'm pretty sure at this point you guys are aware that Atlanta not only is modeling episodes off of real events, but they put in place in some of these episodes real life shit. Like, for example, what episode was it? Was the episode where Darius is walking down the street and he's on his way to a restaurant and he sees that it's closed, like it's gone out of business. Then he sees the food truck and he's noticing that the name is somewhat familiar, or the aesthetic is very familiar. That the white woman that owns and runs the food truck, he picks up on the fact that she used to be a customer of the restaurant that was there before it went out of business. And not only that, that the menu looks oddly familiar, and that the recipe, particularly one that she attempts to get him to try out, is a ripoff of the restaurant. First of all, gentrification is shown there, and also what's shown is how, non-people of color really go to urban spots. I'm not saying all. Go to urban spots or indigenous spots or spots curated and, created by non-people, by people of color, black and browns and yellows, that's not for the actual food and the people and support them, but to steal the recipes and then come down the street in a food truck with those recipes, take out real estate right in front of the very business they were just at a couple weeks ago or a month or so ago, and model their whole style, feel, aesthetic, and menu off of that very restaurant and put that restaurant out of business. Bam. So they get to the funeral in this in the Trini episode that just came out last week, and of all the people they sit next to Chet Hanks. So I was looking and I was like, no, I don't think that's who that is, because the patois isn't as heavy. But I'm sure Donald Glover and the creative team behind that, specifically the director, didn't want all of that tomfoolery that Chet Hanks has been known to do in the past on the social medias, doing that heavy forced patois from the Hollywood Hills kind of shit. So he looked different, which is crazy because it's like, when a person dials back what they're known for, they look unfamiliar to you. Caught that. So they sit next to him, the three, the husband, the wife, and the little boy. And, as is the case with other cultural funerals, there is a sermon to speak on the life. There is chanting and cultural dance. Everything cultural is thrown into this thing. And at some point, there is a chant or a hymn or a sing-along at some point. And the little boy not only gets the feel and the spirit, but he's also chanting and knows the lyrics of this particular Trinidadian hymn from the sermon. And the mom is blown away. I think in her mind, she's slowly putting two and two together just as to the magnitude the nanny that has passed has had on her son, further exacerbating her fear and her insecurity. And I'm sitting here watching, I'm like, I just know she is not feeling this. Now, mind you, at this point in the background, at the top of the episode, after they got the phone call that the nanny has passed away, they get a knock at the door. And it's one of multiple attempts to have this envelope delivered. But I noticed the first time they got it, They hadn't opened it. But I feel like the envelope coming the second time and they marking it the second attempt, even though it's been delivered, there was something there, and I'll get back to that after I've come to the rest of this review. At some point, I remember that they got a call that there was she had made a call to the husband, and they were commenting about, they got some criticism about picture day, how they weren't there and all the other kids were there with their parents for picture day and they weren't there. And again, this is a prime example as to the lack of involvement, intentional or unintentional, consciously or subconsciously, that white parents that work or are outside of the home more, leaving the nanny to be there all the time, miss out on crucial moments, especially during the grade school. Like, that's not news. And I love that they were able to capture yet another big example. Because I don't know about y'all, but growing up, school pictures were a big deal. Finding the right clothes, picking out the right backgrounds, coming from a large family, that's a big deal. So the dad felt bad. I think that moment also played a part in the mom's, I wouldn't say disdain for the nanny that passed, but more so a resentment in her own self and how it manifests in further microaggressions in this episode, where she was kind of, her attitude was pushing more, instead of just appreciating the Trinidadian nanny and her culture and what it means, she was pushing even further, pulling tighter more towards the appeal and the aesthetic that Eurocentric standards push out, as to the attractiveness of, or the idea that the or members of Orient and Asian descent are just more beneficial. It's kind of like, with France, having a French or a British aesthetic or feel or spirit does for the, I guess, the worldly and cultural nurturing and maturity that parents want for their child. Like, just mentioning it, social stock goes up, and it's not, it's an asset that you can't see, but you feel it. And sometimes that's more important in certain circles. Unfortunately, society has had this long-standing negative connotation and taste in their mouths that liken Trinidadians or island people with poverty and little to no value, unless the value is one way. Work hard, so we'll put them to work, put them through high demanding physical labor type of jobs, pay them less, don't think any more of them beyond what you pay them, and have them in a demenial position. And with that, there comes this attitude that they're only to be of use in two areas, the bedroom and the washroom or kitchen. very archaic, very patriarchal, so to speak. And so you see that coming out of the mother, the wife character in this episode, and towards the end of the episode, there really isn't a resolve. The dad doesn't see it yet. The mom sees it, and it manifests in microaggressions, which stem from resentment and insecurity towards this woman who, although she's had a great impact on her son, is not viewed greater than equal, greater to equal, or as favorable, even though she's been made aware that the Trinidadian nanny was taking care of her son, very attentive, has broadened his palate culturally, not only with food and the spiritual aspect, but also the meaning of family, how hard she worked, all these great assets and all these great attributes that you'd want any of your kids or anybody in your family to be exposed to, that shifts the narrative and bestows a positive image of that culture and of those people into a people that otherwise generationally has a negative taste or feel because of the media, the news, not only international and world news, but stateside as well, that they're either gonna they're all about crime and stealing, or they're just nothing more than what we can get out of them labor wise. As the episode goes on, you start to see more positive reinforcements come out of the father, although he's not able to make sense of what this package is about. And I found it interesting that they made it look like they missed him by saying second attempt, even though he got the package. But I feel like throughout that entire episode, the spirit of not only the nanny was alive and well, not only in the scene where the son says goodnight to her in the chair that she normally sits in before he goes to bed, but also the spirit of the universe, where they're both aware that you haven't opened this package. So we're making a second attempt for us to bring attention to this package, so you get what has been hinted and has been thrown at your way all throughout this episode as to the greatness that this woman has in her. If it hasn't been clear at the funeral, as to not only how other cultures grieve and celebrate the life of the person that has passed, and not only also what the absence of this woman in her own kids' lives in favor of taking care of your environment and your children, and in turn just subconsciously being a mother to your son, and what sacrifices how that has played out at the detriment of her own kids. For what more needs to happen before you realize? Well, apparently opening up the package finally at the end of the episode and seeing that not only was your Trinidadian nanny at picture day, but was also in some of the pictures. And you had to pick up on it that as the camera pans through the pictures, you see the nanny's face change. And it goes from, yeah, I'm here, to, why the fuck aren't y'all here? I was like, I caught that. And I was like, yeah, that's the knife in the heart I like to see. And the dad stood, or sat down in the hallway, realizing, oh yeah, they really messed up. They really messed up, and they need to do a better job of not only being more involved with their son and his well-being and his growth and maturity as into being a young man, but valuing indigenous and island people more. I bet that curry was slamming too. I need to rewatch the episode and see what the name of that curry was again and see if I can get a recipe for that. And how funny was it that the father thought it was really spicy? I was like, I kind of feel like that was a jab by Donald Glover to say that the mayonnaise people are overwhelmed by subtle spice. And it wasn't spicy at all if the son could eat it. But I got the jab and the joke. I used to joke with other white people that wind is probably spicy to y'all. Y'all be out here complaining, ooh, it's just so hard, so I could only imagine this subtle curry was spicy to this fluorescent mayonnaise skin colored white man that does his morning runs all the time with his headphones plugged in. Looks like he's from somewhere up in New England. Like, this little bit of curry probably gave him acid reflux by the end of the episode. But, I can't help but be shady and petty when I'm talking down about the white Sprites. Oh, the vanilla Frosties. But again, Atlanta got it going on. I was a little worried. They took a 2-year sabbatical off. Season 2 had me thrown. That's one of my favorite seasons. But season 3 has like a low key, under the radar kind of thing. You watch some of the episodes, the first one, and you're like, what's going on? And then later on, you're like, oh shit. Not only is the shit that I'm experiencing or have experienced is reflected in some of these episodes, but they really giving it to us. Giving us a lot to chew on and reevaluate as far as relationships we have with non-people of color, but also what they've been showing us and what we're not discussing, and we need to be discussing it more. That's why the I Refuse podcast is here. And you should be following and subscribing wherever you see us, because we get down into it. While reviewing and discussing episodes and TV shows, we also open up about our own personal experiences and what we see reflected in these episodes that speak to us. So this is Mr. Fox, the I Refuse podcast. Follow and subscribe wherever you see us. You will see over here where we're located and where to find us. We appreciate all the follows and subscribes, and we're gonna be around for a while. We're on 8 streaming platforms. We're on YouTube. Ta-da! We're also on 3 social media platforms. I Refuse Podcast on Twitter. I Refuse Podcast the underscore between the words. That's our Instagram. And we're also, it's like that also on Facebook. You know, we're just a small lemonade stand trying to catch up with some of y'all out here. But we black, we back, and we out here. So stay hydrated, stay blessed, and keep your eyes on your own paper. Peace.